Hey, and welcome and welcome and welcome. This is TSG Live Talking Trains once again. I'm John, one of the
And, I,
co-hosts.
and I'm Murf, the other one.
The other
Back at home
co-host.
base. Yes.
Yeah. So we're here today to talk about something that I've been wanting to do this show, Murph, for a long time, but I don't know like how to approach the subject, right? Because these are things that people get vicious about sometimes.
It's kind of funny when I met you asked me a couple weeks ago, what should we do? And I'm like, we could do Holy Wars. And all of a sudden it was like evil glint in John's eye. And I was like, oh. At the same time, it's kind of like, I have to admit, I'm a bit of a troll in this stuff. I really have a hard time taking a side, but I really will like watching the scrum over these things. So there's some good topics in here.
Right? Yeah. I'm the guy with the popcorn, watching the,
Yeah.
the meme. I think it's Michael Jackson or someone just stuffing their face with popcorn.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it should be fun. And I have a little presentation, and each one's a slide. So we're going to move the slide and just everybody on. It's kind of like going to be like kind of a panel discussion is how I'm thinking of this. And we have some other folks that I've invited on, and they've graciously accepted to appear with us. So I'm going to bring them on now, one at a time here. So first, we're going to go to our Murf and my old friend Pat real quick here. So here comes Pat. There he is. Hi, Pat.
Hello there, gentlemen.
Yep.
Hey, Pat.
Pat LaTorres, you've been on the channel before. I think you were on one of our original panel discussions over down at the depot, right at Santa Clara Depot.
Yeah, it's something on narrow gauge, I believe. And
I think it was, yeah.
Also.
Or maybe it was scratch building. I don't remember, but it was one of the old TSG Live Crew Lounge episodes that we did. And so welcome back to the channel. It's nice to see you. Yep. You've since moved away, which really sucks because we used to like seeing you at the local PCR meets and all that. But that's okay. You had to do your own thing. You had to blaze your own trail.
Life is an adventure. We're just taking the next stage of it.
That's right.
Pat is one of the people that I remember actually kind of welcomed me to the region. I think it was back at X 2011. One of the local members around here that kind of encouraged people to get going and things. Someday I will take your suggestion and get involved in the AP program. You and your wife both encouraged me at that point. I was kind of surprised and encouraged. So that was cool. So
they were just being nice, Murph.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, Murph was more a matter of compared to what else we had to encourage you.
Oh, okay. I am the lesser of some evil somewhere.
Well,
okay.
Actually, Murph, I think that you could be flattered by the idea that someone said you should, try to get your AP certificates because our division very specifically is full of really, really good modelers. So, and you know that, Pat, you were here long enough to know who I'm talking about. It's all the way outdoors.
That's the hardest thing. Getting an AP certificate in one of the building categories is they judge on a curve, and the curve in this region is set a lot higher, unfortunately, for some of us, myself included. No, they push, and it encourages your modeling to learn things, and that's the biggest thing. My mom was a school teacher. I learned about learning early on. And even after I graduated from high school and got out of college, I would still go back every 6 months for some course. It could be underwater basket weaving. It could be, anything, just to keep the educational process going, keep the thing in here going. And that's something I cannot stretch. Whatever your interest is, keep learning.
One of the best things about our region here is that even though there are excellent modelers here, all of them are very positive in my experience. Everybody's really encouraging. So we're lucky.
Yeah, I'm sure that we'll talk more about this because we have.
Yes.
I
a
have
different
very
story.
specific stuff set up on the screen, and we can bring up the AP program because that in itself can be a holy war. But before we get to that, we have to bring Mike on because he's been sitting down here. He disappeared for a minute, so I was letting you guys talk until he showed back up, and he showed back up. So, in case anybody's wondering, here he is. There's Mike. Hey, Mike. Welcome
Hey,
back.
Mike.
Hey, how you doing?
Right, you all know Mike, the recently retired legendary conductor, and I actually have something here. I don't know how closely people watch the channel here, but there is something that Mike shared with me that was really, really cool, and I want to play it as part of his introduction. Is that okay with you, Mike?
Yeah, and let me just get a little preface on the whole matter.
Sure.
I was the conductor that day, and I was walking back to the yard office, and the dispatcher 5'8" said, "Okay, I got something special for you, Mike." And of course, he's in Omaha, Nebraska. We're in Oxnard, California. And then he read off this, and also just guys, when you do hear it, it's John had to speed it up a little bit because it was a minute and a half. And okay, so roll it or
Is that enough
however.
of a preface?
Yeah, and you'll see the engine in the background.
Yeah, I liked that part of it. It's
Oh, and I had the presence of mind to record it, and of course it was playing through my my handset on my chest right below me.
All right,
And the very last voice you'll hear be me.
I think it's a cool thing. So here we go.
All right.
Okay, I need to rewind it. Here we go.
That is correct. Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, Kevin. I always enjoy working with you.
Take care.
But he didn't say anything about if you find yourself on a live show with these nutcases.
Yeah, he doesn't know about my alter ego.
Yeah, so that was the dispatcher's farewell to the legendary conductor.
Yeah, he's been the dispatcher ever since I was on that job, which is going on 5.5 years. So, day in and day out, we talk to him, and he likes to banter at us, when we get on and off. And he has developed an infinite trust with us that we will not delay his Amtrak trains. On that particular job, we meet two Metrolink trains and up to 6 Amtrak trains, and I think we might have delayed one time in 5.5 years one of the trains, but that was some circumstances completely out of our control.
Yeah, that's pretty good though for a record. I mean,
I think it is pretty good.
Yeah, what is it? The Surfliners and the Metrolink is in your area?
The Surfliners, the Coast Starlights. Sometimes it comes later.
Yeah.
But we would, if we couldn't do something, we'd have to we'd clear up for them. So take note of that, model railroaders. Dispatcher tells you to be in the clear. Keep track. We keep track of our schedules. We're not like sitting there going, "Oh, there's a train coming." We know.
Just need to make one more move, man.
No, it's not like that out in the real world.
Yeah.
The next day you'd be waiting for 5 hours, then you can go out and do your work.
Right? Get off the main, man. That's it. That's another thing, and this could be a holy war. Talking about model railroaders and dispatchers, right? Because Murf dispatches the club down here, the Silicon Valley lines, and sometimes people have a hard time realizing or recognizing that he's kind of like the boss of the layout when he's dispatching it.
It's kind of funny what Mike just said, because I'll tell you, there are some operators where it's like, no, I'm not letting you out yet. You will mess up my schedule.
Yep.
You're going to wait till after this train goes through.
They should familiarize themselves with the schedule and know when the if you have regular trains coming. I mean, I'm working in CTC territory also, so we don't have a schedule per se. We just have it written down, and we know when the trains are going to be there at different locations. The two main locations the 10 miles apart. But if we think we can't make it to a location, we will clear up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got to duck in somewhere.
And we only had I think 4 different places that we could actually clear up. So that's another thing that we had to note. But that comes with experience, of course.
Well, I have a question about that, Mike.
Expect.
We'll get to our main topic here in a minute, but I'm kind of curious about something, which is, so you're running a local, but you have to know like how many cars you have to know if you'll fit in the sidings. Were all the sidings always long enough for your entire train, no matter what?
Oh, generally the most cars we ever had was maybe 20, and one of the sidings is over 10,000 feet long.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
and then the other siding is I think around 6,000 feet long, and so there was a few times like we shoved over to another railroad that we have to get behind the signal and not worry about road crossings too. So in that case, yeah, so a long train we would go, we only have 8 cars. We'll have to shove back to clear the crossings. You can't just block a road crossing for an infinite amount of time also in a city.
Yeah.
So
well, it'll block
a lot of stuff goes into this, a lot of more stuff than meets the eye, and I've been trying to do clinics and things to make people aware of the prototype operations, and once you get to know it'll be fun.
Well, now that you're retired, you'll have more time to do the clinics too. So
yeah, well, me and Dave Bayless are going to be doing one in March at the PCR clinic in San Luis Obispo.
Oh, good.
We've already been asked to do some things, so
excellent. Yeah, that's another one of those events that I'm going to be talking about here on the channel as it gets a little closer,
right,
to the time. And I think we talked about it already, Mike. I'd like to try to make sure that you get that into the virtual room, because we're going to be doing a virtual simulcast of like we did earlier
right.
this year. So anyway, sorry, Pat, we're putting you to sleep. I need to bring
this is good, because as somebody who's enjoys operations, he's nailed on some things. I was gonna say, you got to sit down with Breezy Gust and Dave, and the three we put together from the 3 different perspectives: the engineer, the dispatcher, and the conductor, as to what you do and don't like about those other guys.
That might start a war right there.
Hey, I'll pay to watch him.
Oh, speaking of paying to watch, I'm going to bring up a little banner that I never show on here for people. If you enjoy content like this, please consider supporting the channel on Patreon. There's a link for that in this video's description on YouTube. You can go straight down there and pay like $2 a month. It's cheap and it's such high quality content. Just look at these guys. You can't get this kind of expert commentary anywhere else.
Yeah, I've been a Patreon member for over a year now, and I get the new videos as soon as they come out, and I'm liking them, commenting on them.
Yeah,
and keeping John in enough food. His Grecian formula, he still can't afford that, but
yeah, I'm still working on the Grecian formula.
Yeah, I haven't shaved. I was on an airplane flight. I just got here from Rhode Island, and I have a little white here, so I have bear with that.
That Grecian formula is very expensive. So if enough people sign up for Patreon, I might have, there you go. I might have some black hair, jet black.
It would be.
Wouldn't that be good?
John, just call what you got as light blonde.
Well, it's blonde. Yeah, I'm a blonde.
I know someone would pay good money to get their hair dyed that color. So
Right?
That's right.
I know that talk like a blonde. Oh, I shouldn't say things like that because they're blonde. That's one of those things we don't talk about that. Anyway, let me bring up our topic here because I don't want to. Oh, I'm platinum. That's even better. Platinum's the most expensive metal. So, okay, enough BS. We have to get that stuff out of the way in the beginning because the whole rest of this is going to be BS, and we don't want to bore
This
ourselves.
is serious stuff coming up.
It is. It's
Go
Holy
into it.
Wars, man. Look at that.
That's
Hey,
right.
look at this. It even has a train on it. So what we're talking about when I refer to Holy Wars is the kind of stuff that model railroaders argue about. And I've seen some pretty vicious arguments, especially on social media, about some of the things that we're going to discuss here. And at least for me, guys, the approach, well, let me just bring these up and we'll go one by one. And anybody who's watching is welcome to, we're going to have one at the end where people can tell us their Holy War topics and we'll discuss them. So should be a lot of fun. We usually do stuff that's more serious than this, right, Murph? So
Oh yeah.
let's have some fun with it.
This is very
Okay,
serious
so
to some people, though.
here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to advance the slide, and maybe your screen is different, but on my screen, I'm at the top of the list. Then it goes to you, Murph, then to Pat, and then to Mike. So why don't we just go in that order? I'm going to advance the slide, and Murph, you go first, then Pat.
Okay.
Okay. Is that what it looks like to you guys? Or am I on the top and then Murph and then
You're on the top, young man.
You're right.
Okay.
Yep.
So here we go. You ready? This is you, Murph.
Yep.
You ready?
Okay.
Hey.
DC versus DCC. Man, I've seen discussions about how stupid DCC is, and then I've seen other people go off on, well, why would you want to use DC? And, for me, it's kind of like, well, what do you have the most of? It's hard for me to take it as a holy war. I look at it as when I got back into the hobby after being gone for 40 years, I saw DCC, and that was like magic stuff back in the 70s. There were a couple systems that did some form of train control over with a carrier over DC, and DCC that I could just buy off the shelf without having to like solder circuits was an amazing thing. And then I'd get into an argument with somebody that was like, oh no, man, you got to go DC because I've got all these trains. I still remember going to the Walnut Creek Club here in the Valley, and the coolest thing was walking into their actual train control room, and they have a bank of knobs where every engineer had a twist knob of like 10 cab positions, that so they could follow their train around this humongous layout. But the coolest thing, my wife and I are both computer nerds. We went into the back room and they had tons of Pac Bell, like solenoid switches clicking through as the engineers followed their train. And I'm like, this is what you walk away from when you don't have to do DC anymore. Had 2 wires to connect to a layout, allegedly. Go ahead, Pat. I'm sure you can take it from 2 wires connecting to a layout.
Well,
Yeah, speaking of loose wires, Pat, it's your turn.
thank you so much. Shocking. Both of them have their pluses and minuses. I model, among other things, in ON30, and one of the big things in that is micro layouts, which are pizza box layouts. And in those cases, DC is sometimes all you need because you've got one little 040 locomotive pulling some cars going around in the circle through various scenes that you've super detailed. And DC is all you need for that. The other side of the coin with digital command control is when you start operating in a yard. And I remember the first time I operated, I'm not going to say how long ago it was, but on Jim Providenza's layout, and they threw me into Mac Street, which is his big yard. And I was running DCC, and I was able to do things I had never been able to do before with excuse me, with DC, is that running locomotives onto the same track from either end to swap cars around, and this was like way cool. And I think for a person who is into operations, digital command control is really the hot number. Murf's comment that people said, well, I've got all these locomotives and they're still DC. And one of the first problems we came up when we changed the San Leandro Club from DC to DCC, and people used that exact argument. And our answer was, how many of those locomotives do you regularly run? And if you don't run them, does it make a difference whether it's DC or DCC? And we had a 90-year-old member who was one of the big pushers for the DCC. So you can't say it was just the young guys.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key is they both have their pluses and minuses. They both have their place in the hobby. My home layout is going to be DCC, but I could go to the other side of the coin is I run 120.3 scale live steam. I don't have to worry about it because we're all steam powered.
Okay.
I'll pass it on to Mike.
Well, I have to have a beef about this whole conversation because John didn't add the words AC versus DC versus DCC. Because when I started model railroading with American Flyer Set, that was AC. So look, let's just forget about that though. But yeah, AC/DC. And I had a store for a while, for about 5 years, a model railroading store, and that was early on in the late 80s, early 90s, and we had the onboard system came out, and that was one of the first commercially available DCC type systems, and so people were really into that, although it was very expensive. And now, the mass marketing has really gotten DCC, and even a lot of the rail fans the kids that are around that watch us switch cars, they all have DCC. So it's become a new standard, and the sound is incredible alone. Just the stuff you can do with your receiver, and then building lash ups, turning on dynamic braking, horns, etc. Remember the old PFM? Giant little console. They like a few narrow gaugers would have that. That thing was extremely expensive at the time. But if like you say, if you have a single layout in a briefcase or something, DCC is fine. Or DC is fine. But there's so many great things about DCC now. It's almost, you can't even argue it, I would say. I'm looking at 50, 60 locomotives with DCC and 25 with sound.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't like it, you can always look at this hat.
Yeah, the Rail Pro thing. I saw one guy was putting in Rail Pro in too. This guy had the most gorgeous, huge layout. And even more, he had one room just for working on his locos. And this guy at an open house, he must have had 24 shelves open putting in Rail Pro into every one of these things. Now that's still kind of more like a digital command and control thing in that they operate independently with separate throttles. DC, in order to actually do separate speed control over engines and that kind of stuff, they operate within a block on the layout, and you route power directly to a particular block. So you're kind of more having to assign a throttle to a particular piece of your layout in order to keep control over things. And if a train goes over into the next block, well, they're in whatever throttle is controlling that block. So anyway, Rail Pro, I'd consider it more like DCC. And actually, it's getting into a whole nother thing, which is called dead rail, which is, I think, pretty exciting, actually.
Yeah,
anyway, sorry.
We can make a note of that, Murph, because we can talk about dead rail versus track power. That's more of a larger scale thing right now, but we can talk about that later. But yeah. I think what you just said is the only comment, because you guys have really covered everything that I could have said. The things that I was thinking were pretty much what Pat said about, it depends what you're into. If you're into operations, realistic operations, you have to go with DCC, I think, because it slows everything down. You're turning on the bell, you're doing the right horn soundings and all that stuff. And to me, it's a little bit more fun because you can pretend you're actually running the engine, and you can hear the sound of the prime mover ramping up and all that stuff. And like Mike was saying, the dynamic brakes, you can turn that on. There's all kinds of really cool things to it.
Dimming the headlights and
right,
everything.
all that stuff. And the ones that have the ditch lights are, even that, right? And the other thing you can, right, you can do the rule, what is it, rule 17, I think, where you dim the headlights if somebody else is coming. There's all kinds of
correct, yeah.
Right. There's all kinds of little sort of, I don't know, subtle things, especially if you know some of the rules, like 17, probably the only one I know. But the point is, if you know stuff like that, you can operate things much more prototypically with DCC.
And not to mention, in the old days, you'd be running on somebody's house or something, and they're running to their block, and their engine would take off on their throttle at, max speed. They're going, well, why isn't my engine running? And you're, the next thing it's an Addams Family crash. So,
right. The other thing about DC and DCC for me is with DCC, as long as you have your equipment properly speed matched, you can do stuff like a DP, a distributed power unit, someplace else in the train, and really run prototypically accurate looking to the prototype trains with mid-train helpers or rear pusher or whatever. So to me, well, I think I'll leave it at that. If you're going to put, one more thing. If you're going to put a train under the Christmas tree, DC's fine. It's just going to go in a circle. So now I do want to highlight this. I'm really kind of disappointed that it's doing it this way, because when I turn the comments on, Mike disappears. But Mike, it's okay. You look better. Like
that's okay.
Yeah. All I can see is that special hat with the message on it. But this is what I'm talking about. Here we have Bernard from Miniprint saying, why would anyone even consider DC? That's how strongly is it 1974, right? That's how strongly people, feel about this stuff.
That is a proper Holy War comment.
It is. That was very appropriate. Thank you, Bernard. Yeah.
And not to mention, you have a big red emergency stop button. If you really get yourself in trouble, that's a neat feature in itself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Here's another one that is, similar with DCC. You can run many trains at once. Exactly. And that kind of goes to my DPU comment. But anyway, okay, we can probably do a whole show just on this, I think. So I'm going to advance the slide, and we're going to look at the next one. You ready for this?
I am ready.
Okay, now this
one. Oh God.
Yep. No. This one we have to do this, and I put this one on here for you, Mike. So we're going to go in the reverse order this time. This time,
that
Mike, you get the first word.
Well,
SP versus U. Now you worked for both of them, right?
Correct. And I hired out with the Southern Pacific in 1979 in Los Angeles, California, at Taylor Yard. And then when UP, of course, Rio Grande had a finger on us for a while, and then UP took over in I think 1996 was sort of the takeover, and a lot of people, a lot of the old SP guys go, oh, UP, they're a little heavy-handed sometimes in rules and compliance, but Southern Pacific was heading towards Rock Island, or these railroads that went completely defunct. So we all could have been out on the street and looking for other jobs at the Santa Fe or whatever. And so the UP definitely isn't strangling for money, so they were definitely fixing a lot of tracks. We had a lot of derailments. When I first hired out at SP, derailments were commonplace. Almost if you worked on one of these, not on the main lines, but if you worked on one of these local jobs, you were really chancing derailments and things like that. And they went in and slowly repaired tracks and things like that over the years. But of course, people speak fondly of the past, and that's why they have their love of Southern Pacific. And that was sort of a neat railroad. They did neat things, and they had the daylight and everything else, and UP took over and basically eliminated it. But You can still model Southern Pacific as I do. I model 1979 era, and I have a ton of defunct boxcars from all kinds of railroads that don't exist anymore. So that's my big comment. And when you work for a company, what's the main thing you want? To get paid. And that was definitely a concern, according to our union, when we were first having the big meetings. And I'll pass it on if anybody else has some more comments.
Well, I'll go along sort of what Mike was saying. I grew up with the SP. My dad worked 30 years as a switchman out of Oakland. And so as my earliest memories were going down to the train yard with him, going to the diesel shops in Oakland at Homestead. And I vaguely remember someplace in the back there riding in a steam switcher when I was probably in the 3 or 4 year old range, while they were still running them down in Oakland. But I grew up with that. I mean, we'd always make jokes about the Union Pacific or the Santa Fe, just because that was our road, was SP. That's what we grew up with. Having spent time now studying the railroad a lot, I have a bias towards it because it was an interesting railroad. It did a lot of innovative things, and the last few years they had some questionable management. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and as far as innovative things, one of the very first trains I ever had when I first came to work was the double stacks, the red, or I believe they were orange. They were the early experimental double stack containers, so they were innovative, as you said. Pass it on.
So, yeah, it's kind of funny. My first go around as a model railroader back when I was a teenager, I was actually, even though I grew up in Michigan, I somehow became attracted to the Southern Pacific. I like their big engines, the SD45s, the T-2s, that kind of stuff, and their mountain railroading stuff. And so I had kind of a large collection of those kind of engines. That was back in the day when Athearn blue boxes were real cheap. Then when I came back into the hobby, SP was basically gone, and it was all UP, or SP had been subsumed to UP. And so I just kind of naturally flowed into collecting UP stuff, which still satisfied the they run big engines kind of thing. The thing that I have a little bit of a weak spot for, though, if you really want to weather engines, nobody weathered engines like the SP did. The number of times you get pictures of trio of engines piling out of a tunnel with a billow of black smoke in the front, and you can hardly even see the bloody nose of the damn engine on the lead unit at all. That's weathering. That's just absolutely astounding. The way their paint peels, there's no effect you get like that on a UP engine. Even as people complain about UP engines being dirty, let me tell you, UP can't hold a candle to SP dirty. And there's something about the flavor of that kind of railroading that you just don't get with a UP or most other modern railroads. So anyway,
Yeah,
got a little
grimy
soft
black was created for a reason.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
So
I'll close this one out by just saying the most interesting comment I ever heard about this, I think, was something you said, Mike, at the clinic you did here, whenever that was, or maybe it was a conversation we had on one of these shows where you said SP or UP, because, you know, people loved, especially out here on the West Coast, people loved it. SP fans hate UP, especially the really rabid ones. They hate it. And they want to try to give you a gotcha question, you know, like, oh, well, you worked for both of them. And they want you to say how much better SP was, because that's what they think,
Right.
You know, having never worked for the railroad or anything like that. And what you said a minute ago was, hey, it's 4 feet, 8.5 inches between the rails. And as long as the check doesn't bounce, I'm working. And that, right. I mean, for me, if it has flanged wheels, I'm happy. So I don't really care. I'm one of those people that just doesn't have a favorite when it comes to stuff.
And I will say, and one more thing I'll say before we close out this one out is believe it or not, their whole their operating characteristics aren't a whole lot different. I mean, they do things the same way the SP did, which kind of amazed me. Their management structure is very similar. A lot of people aren't aware of that. When I say that, I mean is like the roundhouse operates in a separate entity than the operating department and the track department. So, the operating department essentially makes all the money for the company. The other people are just strictly support people. And I was amazed that they both operate that same way. And then when we converted our computer systems over, they had basically the same computer system. It wasn't hard to learn. We took us about 3 hours to learn it, and it was basically the same thing. They had a few different codes, but that was it.
Yeah. Possum Bayou talked in chat here about SP's light configurations. The other thing of note is the SP window configurations on their general cabs, where they actually had the L-shaped windows. That was kind of interesting to see too. Was it the gyro lights on the SP? I think it was.
Right.
Okay, and then UP. I remember in the '80s driving through. I think it was Utah, and a UP wigwag kind of light was going through a canyon. It was the most eerie thing I've ever seen. Just seeing the light bouncing back and forth on rock faces.
Yeah, they'll put you to sleep too. Watching
Oh,
it,
really? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, if you watch the video that John produced, the young brakeman's journey, you can find it on TSG. I discussed some of that stuff in there. You're working for the SP in '79, and a lot of pictures and things. And I think that people would enjoy that if you want to have more information.
Yeah, I'll put a link to that, I think, in
that would be a good idea.
Description of the video at some point after, when this becomes a rerunnable video. But, that was a really fun video to make, by the way, Mike. The storytelling is great, and the story's great. So
yeah, a lot of people really like it. It's got a lot of great comments on it. Please comment. I like to read them and comment back.
I keep seeing these comments in our live chat that I want to comment on, but I know we have some of these coming up. So let me advance this next, and we'll go to the next one. And we'll have to decide who goes first after I see what it is. Uh-oh. I'm not touching this one first. I'm going to let one of you guys go first. Because this is one that just showed up on the chat. only the person who typed it in did not type it in as Digitrax. They typed it in as something else.
Yeah, well, okay. So I did the original. We actually did a comparison of NCE versus Digitrax back in the day. It was me talking about NCE and John Wiley talking about Digitrax, and we were both civil.
Yeah, this was a model. Yeah, just so people know, this was a model railroading 101 episode about 6 years ago, which I guess I'm going to have to put a link to that in the description as well. So
yeah. I may or may not be guilty of chucking one Digitrax booster quite a ways down my hill at one point or another. Just saying. So my actual feelings about it are a little bit more raw than that. I understand that they've gotten better. Conceivably, their throttles have gotten better. I've worked with Digitrax throttles where their stupid little flexi buttons got stuck underneath their faceplate. That was special. So, yeah, I'm a little bit raw on it. Now, the funny thing was, like I say, in the original video we did, we were both trying to be like, okay, here are the benefits of these things. When I got home, I had a friend that actually does a lot of stuff with DCC contact me to let me know all of the things I didn't talk about as a selling point for NCE and how I should have emphasized how much better it was. And I'm like, that was not why we were here. But it's clearly a real holy war. And I'm heavily into NCE. I've got a power cab that I use for my programming box. I've got a full layout where I use full-blown pro cab and all that kind of stuff with probably about 6 boosters. The club that I go run engines at, et cetera, SVL, has all NCE. The major thing, though, really at the end of the day, it's a matter of who are your friends and who can you get the most support from for whatever system you use. Because if you're out there on an island and you go, oh, I'm going to go off and do this, well, you're on your own. So anyway, I will leave it at that and try not to be quite as acidic about my commentary about the competitors. And take it away, Pat.
Okay, I'm going to say the first digital command control I worked with was Lynn's system, which is no longer even available in the United States, I don't think. That was on Jim Providence's. I've worked Lynn's, I've worked EasyDCC, I've worked Digitrax, I've worked North Coast, and I've worked Airwire on large scale stuff. So I mean, as long as it does what you want it to do in a way that's going to meet your needs, you've got the right product. My comment I made earlier is that I know a lot of people who've changed from Digitrax to North Coast. I personally have never met anybody who's gone the other direction. I'm not going to say it didn't happen. I've not met them. I think Murf really nailed it on the head. What is common in your area, because that's going to be your tech support, is not the well, maybe the hobby shop also where you picked it up, but you know, a lot of the stuff people are buying online now, and thank you, that online dealer, once he's sold it to you, he doesn't really give a hoot. So the people who are around you are going to be your tech support, and that's going to influence you. Again, if it does the job, what of it? I mean, I'm not a computer weenie. Digitrax always seemed to me to be focused towards that. And so it was, you know, getting above my level of incompetence. North Coast, a person who knows left hand from right hand can pretty much program it and make it work, and that's the key. I was lucky. In the Bay Area, we had a lot of clubs that were North Coast, a lot of private layouts that were North Coast. So I got exposed to the North Coast really deeply. I mean, again, I've got a Power Cab that is my programming track, and I've got a Power Pro system that's going to be, when the home railroad gets built, is going to be North Coast, because that's what I'm familiar with, not anything else. You know, and it's just find what people have. Up here, I'm now in Oregon for what that's worth. I say up here, so people will know I'm talking. We're not quite the frozen north. We're working towards it. There's a lot of Digitrax clubs, and I've got to respect that they're there. But since I've already purchased the North Coast stuff, I'm going to stay with it. You got it, Mike.
Yeah, I personally have NCE, and as you were just saying, Pat, we had a small round robin club, and you know, we decided early on to go with the NCE, and that way everybody's cabs would work together and stuff. Now, a good friend of mine, Jeff Abbott, he has Digitrax on his N scale layout. So when we're over there, we're using his throttles, and he has plenty of them. And that, of course, it is nice that the throttles are small. They're the real small throttles, and I will say that. But as far as that's my opinion. I mean, I'm pretty happy with my NCE, and I'll just that'll be all I'll say.
Okay. You get the tape for your mouth. Okay. Well, as everybody probably knows, I've done videos of dozens of layouts, and they've used everything from everything you guys have mentioned here. And there's kind of this thing of Murphy's Law, not you, Murph, but the other one, that something will always go wrong when you're making a video. Something will always go wrong when you're having an open house. So I've seen everything fail. But the main thing to remember that I've experienced is if it's set up properly and you're not asking it to do too much, they work. So that's the important thing. As long as they work and you're having fun, to me, it doesn't matter. So, but I know people have their preferences. So let's go to the next one here, guys. And if I can figure out how to advance this, are you ready?
Yep.
Oh, here we go. This is an interesting one. So who wants to go first on this one? And by the way, I want to mention something before we go. I put this in the private chat, but I don't know if everybody saw this. We have to try to keep our comments to a little bit shorter because we won't get through all these at the rate we're going.
Got it.
Yeah. So who's going to take this one? Scratch building versus store bought. I have an opinion about this. I haven't gone first yet. Should I just go?
Go
I
ahead.
think you probably
Okay.
should. I think you've had more experience with both.
Well, I haven't
maybe
really
Pat.
scratch built anything, but I do have an opinion about this because I do a lot of product spotlights and product evaluations, right? That's one of the things that comes out every single week on this channel. And the one thing I will say about this, which is kind of a tangent to the topic that's on the screen, is I appreciate what the store-bought products are because it makes it so that we don't have to scratch build everything. So now that is to say that I am not someone who's like a hardcore builder. If you love building stuff and scratch building is your thing, then scratch build absolutely is what you should do. And to sort of comment, we were talking earlier, or someone had mentioned, I think in the comments to the side, something about the SP light packages. And that's something that you quite often have to add to your models. So you're having to kit bash something you bought anyway. But what I think of is it easier to add a light package to an already, built store-bought GP40, for example, or whatever your favorite locomotive is, or is it easier to scratch build the whole thing? That's all I'm going to say. So let's see. I'll pick someone to go. Mike, why don't you go next?
Yeah, my only comment is, if scratch building is almost like a hobby within a hobby, and as we're just talking about the achievement program, that's one of the things I believe. Pat can maybe elaborate on that, but people that people who are, I've seen some incredible work with people building their own brass engines. I would say scratch building. I mean, this is a personal opinion, but people that are building structures is where the scratch building. If you're on a model a particular building that is not made, you're going to be scratch building, and it's it's a very time consuming, but the amount of appreciation I've seen at different shows, and the work that's gone into these guys have done it, and gals have done it. It's just gorgeous work. But if if you don't have the time, the store bought's fine. And the store bought stuff has gotten so incredible. Years ago, though, you had to scratch build it, make it look better. Otherwise, very toy stuff. And that's all I can really say about it. But yeah, it's just some beautiful scratch built things I've seen. I mean, just incredible things. I'll pass it on.
Who are you passing it on to?
Right above me, Pat. Talk about it.
As a person who started off modeling the SP back when Athearn came out with their blue box tunnel motors, and Bob Zink did a really good article in Model Railroader about super detailing the blue box tunnels. And this was the first time I'd ever tried scratch building or kit bashing, I guess is more appropriate. And I found out it was enjoyable. I mean, as somebody, and I'm looking.
Uh-oh.
Did he freeze?
He's frozen.
60s, and
now he's back.
building models was always a lot of fun. And so to build a model of a locomotive or a rail car or a building, it's a challenge. It's fun. It's going to be time consuming, but it's a kick in the pants to do it because you've got something that you created. I mentioned again earlier, I had a couple of caboose that I built for an NMRA National Convention model contest, and I was not well. I went through and did an ON 30 model caboose that was all of maybe 18, 20 scale feet long. I did full brake rigging in the underbody and full interiors. And I would not necessarily encourage other people to do that, because you're going to do things that are going to require a lot more on your part, a lot more effort. So, and Mike mentioned the AP. The achievement program is something that it's a challenge for me. It's a challenge to me to try to make the next model better than the last model. There's so much great stuff out there now that's over the counter and ready to run that I have nothing against anybody buying store bought. I think there's some beautiful models out there. Unfortunately, they're beautiful prices also. But try scratch building something or kit bashing something, which is actually easier. See if you can do it. See if you're comfortable doing it. And if you're not, stay with store bought. It goes back to, what is the hobby to you? If it's running trains from point A to point B, then maybe buying a beautifully detailed over-the-counter part or over-the-counter car, it might be the better way to go for you, more effective use of your time. Follow your heart and let it take you where it takes you. Murph, you got it.
So I've been sitting here wondering how this is a holy war to me. And there's only one place where that's a holy war, and that's people that post pictures of 100 boxes of something they bought at the store versus somebody that posts a picture of something they scratch built. I could care less about the pile of 100 boxes at the store. If you want, I'll go out and I'll buy twice as many if that's what impresses you, and you'll get a lot more likes. But let me tell you, somebody that scratch builds a car, they have, like, I just really admire that. I admire that dedication and skill and everything else. It takes no skill to put down a credit card. It just takes bucks. So anyway, that's it. That's all the holy war for me.
I like that, Murph. I hadn't thought of it that way. But I think, Mike, what you said really puts the nail on the head of this one, which is, in some cases you can't get a specific structure. And I did that whole series with Jack Burgess where every single structure, bar none, every single one of his structures on his layout is scratch built, and they're all beautiful. But he had to do that because no one made a kit of the Yosemite Valley, Bagby Station or whatever. So, as an example. So, anyway,
right. And museum quality.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you watch the videos of Jack Burgess, or you watch some of the stuff that Paul Soeberg does, and really you are kind of humbled. It's like,
Absolutely.
I can't imagine living my life to that level of perfection.
But I think the thing in amongst that is that most of these modelers that are at that level have no secrets. They will show you. And I've gone to a clinic at Jack's house, how to build a styrene building. And he shows you all the tricks to make it easy. And I said, no, but Jack, you're so patient. He says, no, I'm not patient. I want it done, and I want it done now.
Yeah, Jack's definitely not patient. That's why he builds with styrene.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point. He builds with styrene instead of wood because he thought the grain just looked too big on the wood. But that's the key, is that these good modelers have no secrets. Look at the articles Bob Zink is putting in Model Railroader or Mainline Modeler about some of the detailed stuff that he's done, the kit bashing. And all of a sudden you can see, gee, I can do that. And I did 3 really nice tunnel motors. Are they to today's standard? Absolutely not. They're from 1984. But they're not anything to be ashamed of. So I'd say, just follow your heart and try it.
Yeah. Okay, you ready for the next one?
Sure.
This is kind of along the same lines in a way, kind of. Who wants to go? Murph, you should go first this time. Let's go down the stack this time.
Okay, so I've actually seen this be a real holy war. There are people that will not abide by people with freelance layouts, or as I do now, proto-freelance. They really think you should always be modeling a particular prototype. Somebody made a comment about a person who is recently deceased here in the modeling area not enjoying one of the clubs because they actually had no theme and were totally freelance. And that wasn't the way he liked to do railroads. And I get that. At the same time, for a lot of, especially for clubs, and clubs versus solo is yet another topic we should probably discuss. But some people like just having a lot of things on their layout, and really they're doing freelance. They aren't talking about a particular area, they aren't operating in a particular way, and that's just their gig. Whereas other people, we're gonna model a particular railroad on a particular day and a particular hour at this time, and that's prototype, and that's actually cool too. This is one of those where I enjoy baiting. I like being the troll that kicks kind of puts the ball in play and lets the scrum happen. But I've kind of gotten over the whole it's got to be this way or that thing. So let's play out of order. I'm going to scramble up here. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people might, get into the hobby, doing like just buying everything they like, and as you progress, you go, well, I really need to narrow this down, and some people have gone to the extremes on that. But every so often, some new product will come out, and you go, yeah, God, I gotta update my era here a little bit, and me and my other SP buddy, we're actually doing that right now. He had to, some of the scale trains and scales came out, and he had to go, well, they didn't have them in 1978, but I want them really bad. And me the same way. And, you can but then again, with prototype, like, I think the best example of a prototype layout might be like the San Diego Model Railroad Club, where they've, modeled to actually down to the nth degree, but they have a large amount of people to do that. And I think if you want to have fun and, build things the way you want to and build cliffs, and, I look at the guys over the years like Malcolm Furlow, where they had this, giant mountains and the engines were on the edge hanging by, 2x4s. I mean, to look at that stuff is fun. It's just pure fun. And that's what it's all about. And, if you want to do all the studying and stuff and run things exactly like the prototype, go ahead. But if, you can also have fun and make yourself a little holy train for Christmas with little soldiers in it holding, Renaissance flags. I mean, if that's your thing, do it. On to John or whoever.
By the way, John, you did really well. This was one of your first scratch built locomotives. I can tell you did a really good job on it.
One bow and arrow with a flame will take that whole army out.
But anyway, no. Again, my home layout as it gets built is going to be East Oakland in 1959, 1960. So very much prototype, very narrowed down to these locomotives, these cars. I've got all the Sanborn maps and all this crud. So I'm hoping to model something that's very accurate. It's something I've been interested in since the mid 1980s, when the club I was in at the time lost their lease, and we were talking about going to modular, and I wanted to build the Fruitvale packing plant in Oakland, and now I'm going to get the chance to do it. The other side of the coin is I also model ON30 narrow gauge, and they're in that hobby in general, it's very, very much freelance. Though I was modeling the Yosemite Shortline, which was an actual 30-inch narrow gauge locomotive that did exist. But most of my stuff is very freelanced, and it's modeled as if it was built to the proper practices, for lack of a better term. So proto freelancing, I think is what they call that. And what you want to do, I'll be honest, by doing both, I get the best of both worlds. I get to break all the rules. For the prototype people, I get to model freelance and have a ball. And for the freelance people, I get to model a hardcore prototype and the heck with them. What floats your boat, what makes your hobby interesting to you is the important part. And I cannot stress that enough more and more, that do what makes you feel good, but by the same token, don't necessarily put it out there for everybody to, hey, what do you think of this? Because if it's really sort of flaky, they may say it's really sort of flaky, and you may get your feelings hurt. So think about that before you put it out there for everybody to look at. You got it, John.
Okay. So again, I've seen both and I respect both. One thing I will say is, and this came to me, within the past couple of years after I stopped doing the videos with Jack Burgess, that Jack really took that whole prototype thing to a completely different place that it had really no one that I'm aware of had ever gone that far before, meaning taking it to a level of fidelity that is, if it was there, it's on the layout and it's done to the drawings. That's how good it is. But I've seen other stuff that's just cool. There's another layout that comes straight to mind, and it's really of a prototype railroad, but the way it was done is so original that I just really like it a lot. And that's Steve Rediker's Hetch Hetchy railroad in black and white. And I've done layout tours of both of these layouts on this channel, which now I'm going to have to add more links, I guess. I should just keep a running list of links here on my pad that I don't have next to me for when the video's over to add the links. But Steve Rediker's is really interesting because he modeled it in ON 30. Well, the Hetch Hetchy was not a narrow gauge line. It was a standard gauge line. So it's wrong straight off the top. But he had very specific reasons why he wanted to use ON 30. And that is he wanted to run it dead rail because you can't fit batteries and stuff, that the kind of equipment that he needed to run his engines in a HO scale standard gauge, and O scale standard was too big for his space. So there's reasons for it. So I can see going both ways. It just depends what your goals are. And there was something else I wanted to mention about this that I think is important, but I've lost it now. I should have notes for that too. Murph, you wanted to chime in?
Yeah, I have to say, after seeing the videos you did on Jack Burgess's layout, and being there and seeing the dedication he had to it, it's kind of freeing because, quite honestly, after seeing his layout, nobody else actually has a prototype layout.
Not like that.
Nobody here is to that level. Not even La Mesa, from what I've seen. I've seen foreign power at La Mesa you wouldn't get.
Yeah, I know what I was going to say. I just remembered. And that is, if you take Jack's layout as the ultimate prototype layout, which I could argue easily that is absolutely the as far as you can go with a prototype, there are people, and I've heard this argued, who will say it's not prototype. And you're like, what are you talking about? Of course it is. And the answer to the question is, it's still compressed. So it's not a 1-to-1 replica, or 1 to 87th, but 1-to-1 replica, because he had to compress stuff out. The yards aren't as long, all that stuff. The one thing I'll say before I advance the slide, though, and this is important, especially for anybody who's thinking about building a layout, and this is something I learned from talking and working with Jack on the videos, is that if you want something to work on your layout, copy what a real railroad did. Because, and I'm sure, Mike, you could talk to this if you want to before I advance the slide, because railroads solve problems. They don't create problems. So if you want your yard to work, go look at a place that has a yard that is actually a working railroad and take a top-down view of it and use their track arrangement, because it will work. If it didn't work, they would have already changed it. So anyway.
Exactly.
Oh, that'll do. Okay. So let's advance this. We're only on the 6th slide, and we got a bunch of these. So let's do. Oh no. Now I've done it. Okay. Try to keep the answers short on this one. I know it's hard, but let's try to keep it short so we can get through these things. Who's going to go first on this one? Pat, you laughed, but you got to go first.
I'll jump in at the beginning. I'm running my operations special interest group, shirt. I am an ops person, hardcore, 110%. I love running a railroad as a railroad. I've operated La Mesa a number of times. Excuse me. Sorry about that.
Boy,
And it is an operational railroad. By the same token, I have sat at the Mojave Yard for almost 2 hours waiting for clearance to head westward. So that's the trade-off to it. Ops has the drawback in that you're going to get stuck in a location where you're not going to move because the real railroad, you did a lot of sitting. And I think Mike knows about that part.
Sure.
By the same token, I mentioned it earlier to Murf, is that back when I was still gainfully employed, I'd get home from work and I wanted to sit down with a glass of wine, start a train running around in a circle, and become brainless. That's become brain dead and just, this is my therapy right now. But then maybe an hour later, now I'm going to start building a model or try to do some operations. The railroad I'm planning to build here will not have that capability. It's not there. It's going to be a point-to-point operation on 2 levels, and that's just the way it is. And we have to deal with it. So ops and running trains have their purposes. Obviously, for open house train shows, running trains is more important because you want the public to see the trains running. And I hate to say it, but they don't want to see you sitting in the yard, moving back and forth and back and forth and forth and back for an hour. They want to see trains moving down the main line. I think that can be sold. Operations can be sold to the public, but you have to have people who are willing to take the time to educate the public. But it's just, again, what do you want to do and what is the appropriate time? ON30, we build a lot of micro layouts that are about the size of a pizza box with lots of scenery, and they just run around in circles. And that's fine for what they are. People who enjoy the modeling will look at that and see that. So I can say, again, whatever floats your boat. Now, don't let people tell you you're doing it wrong. If you're having fun, you're not doing it wrong.
I changed myself to the bottom so I can highlight this comments when they come up. People don't want to see me anyway.
I'll let Mike or Murf continue from that point.
I'll just pick someone. Which one do you want to go?
I'll take it to Mike.
Take it to Mike.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I've been listening to a lot of Ray Arnett's podcast lately, and a lot of people on there always go, wow, all of a sudden I learned about ops, and now I found like a whole nother hobby within a hobby. And I think that's a lot to do with it. And like you say, though, some people like to just I mean, every so often I'll see one of these Lionel layouts on a YouTube or on a Instagram and go, that's kind of neat. This guy's just like running trains, 100 miles per hour, and GG1s are going by like this. And it's just sort of neat. And our engineer at our job, I actually built him one time a 3-foot piece of track. He bought a Bachmann trolley. It had an auto reverser at both ends, and he would do exactly what you said, Pat. Get totally drunk and just watch this go back and forth for hours. And he was in heaven. And and this is a guy that's a real engineer. So I think ops is something that people develop a time over interest. They get tired of just watching things go in circles per se. But it's a lot involved. And it's another whole interest level. And, of course, we know about there's the ops SIG for those who don't know, layout design SIGs that, discuss these things in detail, all the historical societies and the way SP ran trains versus the way UP run trains. And if you add passengers to the mix and electric operations or whatever, it's all there's so much diversity. Narrow gauge is completely different. You got a lot of guys running switchbacks, time consuming room. And that's all I really have to say on this subject, just to keep it moving. All yours, Murf.
So I think roundy round is fine if there's a Christmas tree in the middle. Other than that, I kind of wonder how many first layouts are made for roundy round, and then they make their real layout when they start figuring out what they want. I think the number of we bought a piece of 4x8 plywood and now we have our track down, or you see these, here's my track plan, what do you think? And I'm like, boring. That will last you until you get done and you run it around 10 times and then you wonder what more there is. For a lot of people. At the same time, I've been in Mike's position where we had a whole Fremo layout set up at some train show, and we had, you know, a run that would take half an hour to go from one end to the other. It was an N scale Fremo layout, and we'd run them at prototype speeds. And the layout next to us was a thing that was a Lionel layout. It was set up like a pretzel, and there were like trains just spinning around there and all that. And some guy came up to me and he goes, "Can you make your trains go faster?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but we wouldn't want to." "Well, why is that?" Because we really want something that runs prototypically. So yeah, we're kind of snobby that way. But yeah, there's something to be said for like getting drunk and watching trains go around.
I'm not going to expand on the whole thing about getting drunk and watching trains, but I will say, similar to what you said, Mike, I also have a very good friend who's an engineer, and I've invited him to op sessions. I'm like, "Oh, you should come do this." It's like, "Well, why would I want to do that?" It's like, "Because it's fun." He says, pardon my French, but he says, "I do that shit all day. Why would I want to go, do it on my day off?" And it's like, you know what? I'm not going to argue with that. So, and he will drink a beer and get drunk watching his American Flyer trains that he has run around in the garage. So, yeah. And I think it's a matter of if you're having fun, you're doing it right. So,
Well, yeah, I get that on my own layout when we've had a couple of the Southern California ops. I mean, I'm more tired doing that than I'm actually doing my real work, because I'm having to be, the dispatcher, the train master, the mechanical officer, the track department all in one, and there's something to be said just to watch something go around in a circle, but it's another diversity.
yep. All right. So here, oh, you're going to go with this one first?
Why not?
Go for it.
Both scales. I've been in both scales actually. I would say junior high school went from American Flyer to a small HO, and then to N. N came out like N really started to get, developed in the late 70s or early 70s, I'll say. And it's so beautiful to look at something so small and miniature, I think, and the N scale has this advantage: you can run super long trains with it, and just watch a train that's like maybe 7 feet long, and that's got 40 cars. HO, I have to limit my trains to 12 cars to fit in the sidings. And I keep buying all these 86-foot box cars, and now I've even got shorter trains.
Well, that's your fault.
But yeah, that's my fault, right? And then HO's got a lot more availability than N scale, but N scale's catching up quick, and it's great if you don't have a lot of room. So I like them both. I'm not going to argue with that. I'll pass it down to the Brady Bunch here.
There's a comment for someone to start off with. I think Bernard's making a great point here.
I think Bernard has a good point at the same time. I just can't holy war over this. Actually, I'm kind of waiting to see Z scale come into the kind of predominance like N scale has too, because I think it'd be even more fascinating for even longer trains. But they've got to cut the cost of the cars down. Oh my God, you can go broke make a 20-foot N scale train. It'll cost you.
Yeah.
Anyway, Pat,
what do you think?
Oh, I'm laughing because Tom Knapp, who I believe just moved from the Bay Area out to Hawaii, but he models in 3-foot narrow gauge, and he scratch built all his locomotives. So This is people who are not well. He's talking about building an N-scale Shay with 2 motors in it.
Oh, jeez.
This is people off the deep end. I was going to go the other direction as I model ON30, which is basically O scale, quarter-inch scale on HO track. And so I found that I can get as big of a railroad in a size that I can see with my failing eyesight as I can in HO. And I can build some very creative models, and I can have a lot of fun with it. The home layout, again, is going to be HO, but that's because I want to model a standard gauge railroad. But I think the thing is, if you want to run a prototype mainline train in HO, you're going to need at least a 2, if not a 3-car garage. By the same token, the first time I operated on an operational in-scale railroad up in Seattle back in 2004, it was wonderful to run 45, 50-car trains and watch them stretch out because in-scale had that capability. I mean, this one gentleman was running along a river with the mountains on the side of the track that are almost 6 feet tall. The trains became part of the scenery. It was very, very impressive, and you could do some good operations. He used tab on car instead of car cards, but that's not in each case. And I've only operated one O scale standard gauge layout, so I'm not going to comment much about that. But it's for if you want an operational layout for a mainline railroad. HO has got a lot to be said for it. Jack Burgess's railroad is a good example. Rick Fortin's railroad in San Jose is a very good example of layouts that run fairly good sized trains, but even those are restricted to 16 to 24 car trains. And that's all you're going to run. So if you want to run long trains, you're going to go to in-scale. I think it's a matter of what you're looking for, what provides your satisfaction. If you want to see a long mainline train, unless you live 5 blocks from the La Mesa Club, you're not going to run 65-car trains on your railroad. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's very important.
So longer trains, smaller scales.
I think so.
Works for me.
I run a logging railroad for my ON30, so based up in northeastern California. And, but even there, you're running shorter trains. You're running a 15-car train. It's a long train. So you have to decide what you're looking for.
All right. Let's see what the next one is. You ready? Here it goes. Okay. This is a holy war. This is a holy war.
Yes.
What do you think, Mike?
Well, yeah, definitely a holy war for sure. And I lean personally to the good enough side because, and I think that it was Alan Keller's layout that he would like the good enough. This is good enough. If you're building a big layout, you have to be the good enough. Now there is people who have done it. I think there's a guy, what his name is, Boomer or something, that he has the modules, and he kind of describes that in his YouTube videos, where he's able to do a small section or a small diorama and really super detail. So if that's your thing, the rivet counting's for you. But rivet counting can, that would be something that you can almost go to blows with people over. Yeah. And I've seen people that, and it just says a note, if you are a rivet counter, you need to keep it to yourself for the most part. And, let people do what they're going to do unless you really know them well. And you might just get thrown out the back door if somebody's layout or not invited back. That's the way I feel. So, but I'm leaning to the good enough effect and the choo-choo Charlie good enough. And I'll pass it on. That's all I'm going to say for the sake of time.
So in the sake of time, I'd like to roll this into one of the future slides, which is FUBI versus accurate. So let's say rivet counting versus good enough versus FUBI. And the main reason I call this a holy war is that Athearn lately has been putting out some FUBI engines.
Maybe you should explain for people who don't know what a FUBI is, what that is.
Okay. Here's an SD70 in SP livery, SD70 Ace in SP livery, or something along those lines. It never happened, but it's a fantasy kind of thing. And the rivet counter people go absolutely freaking nuts, because that means that Athearn isn't putting out an actual like U-boat or something like that. They conflate the two. So they are sacrificing their rivet counting capability of getting a good U-boat out of Athearn because Athearn's wasting time doing FUBI. It's kind of like, no, Athearn's simply repainting a model. In order to make a U-boat, they'd have to actually retool. Or how can you do this when you haven't spent the time making this particular variant that's only run by this railroad over here? And I've been waiting forever because it had a door that opens this way instead of that way. and I'm serious. I've seen these holy wars.
And remember that these companies are out to make money. So I feel like whatever they want to make, they can make. And I think Shane of Scale Train was mentioning that in one of the podcasts, that they might make the turbine in daylight colors, which some people would, oh my God, I can't live any longer. But if somebody wants to buy it, it looks cool, buy it, do it,
right,
buy it.
Yeah. Back in my first go around as a model railroader, I had the Athearn DD40, which kind of looked more like a DD35 actually. And
right.
I had it in 6 different road names because that's what was available at the hobby store when I was buying them. So yeah, I get the whole, I'd really like something that matches this, but you know what? That's your opportunity to actually do some scratch building or actual detailing to get it the right way. But I follow along with Mike. I think the whole good enough thing, actually, I think it was Tony Kester in one of the old RMCs had an editorial trains of thoughts or something like that about, at some point you got to go with good enough in order to get a model railroad done. But anyway, Pat.
And I'm going to preface this by saying a week ago I was up in Portland at the Railroad Prototype Modelers Meet. And for those who are not familiar with one of these, this is people who not only count the rivets, they make the rivets. They want to know all the details, and they will have photographs of it. I go up there because I love to watch, to learn the weathering techniques, and I'll be honest about it. Bob Zink was up there with information about his new Cross-Modify book and one of the new models that Rapido's come out with. And yes, they're really wonderful. And if you want to build a particular car, like I want to build a panel switch car, and I have lots of pictures of it, I will probably try to build this as accurately as I can. My whole railroad will not be that way. I'm looking at the cars at these RPM meets. Most of these people have a dozen cars, and those are the cars that are on their table and display because they can't build an entire train, much less an entire railroad, to that level of quality, which Murf hit. If you want to get a completed railroad, you're going to have to go with good enough. And there's enough good enough models out there over the counter today that you can achieve that. And most people, my hand's in the air, so I'll say yes, would not know whether that boxcar has 6 panels or 7 panels on it, or whether what type of roof it had on it. I won't know. It looks close enough. It has a roof walk, which in 1959-60 was appropriate. Or if I'm modeling 1984, it does not have a roof walk because that was appropriate. Now, those are the things you look at. So, again, work to what you want to do. And I cannot stress that enough, is that there's no wrong way to build a model. Oh, okay. That probably is a wrong way.
Yeah, you haven't seen me build one.
I see a picture of it here on the screen, John. Oh,
yeah.
And just one, I'm going to make a quick comment here, and also let's not, be careful of people in the hobby that are newer to the hobby and they maybe don't know what SP had in 1950. And they bought something, and for some people, just be a grumpy guy and go, they never had those. Just consider who you're talking, or keep it to yourself to get to know the person longer, and don't because there's that just makes people not like the hobby, I think.
And there are
don't be one
ways.
of those guys.
There are ways
Right.
to point it out to people without being one of those guys. It's, well, try this next time and see how that works. It may give you better, something that'll satisfy you. It's called encouragement. And yes, those of us with more time in the hobby, we are educators. Like it or not, we have a certain level of responsibility to help the up and coming modelers to get things together, to try this and see how that works. And if it's not what you want, cool, you're happy. And we can't, it's too easy to say you're not good enough. There's a lot easier ways to say, try this, it might work better for you. Again, Bob Zink's article on the tunnel motors back in 1984 was, to me, wondrous, because he had a bill of materials.
Is someone's cat going bananas in the background? I keep hearing something that sounds. Is that yours, Mike?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, Pat. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I keep hearing this meow, and I'm looking for my cats. Going, it's not them.
No, I got the door closed to my room, so the cats can't get in here.
Well, he's been locked in the house for 6 days while we've been on vacation, so he's quite angry.
Mad at you right now. There's one for you that Robert Darby puts up: cats versus dogs.
Well, as long as they're not eating them, it's okay. I didn't say that. I didn't. You're going to stay away from that. I'm so sorry, John.
Yeah, stop that. Let's go to the next one now.
Go to the next slide before you get in trouble.
Yeah, I will say one thing about rivet counting and good enough, because I didn't say anything about this yet, and it's just a really quick thing, which is if you want to have something that's really, really good, like rivet counter quality, put that stuff in the front and then put the good enough stuff in the back. Like people will have tree building parties with people who don't know how to build trees. But if you need 10,000 trees on your layout, it's great because you can put the ones that aren't as good toward the back and it still serves the purpose.
There was one
practical idea.
Yeah, one model railroader from Sweden, who the first 6 cars in his train and the last 6 cars in his train were all nicely detailed, and the cars in the middle were all blue box.
Yep.
And people see the first cars and see the last cars, and they ignore the stuff in the middle. They don't see it.
Yeah. It's that same Jedi mind trick of putting the trees that aren't so good toward the back. So, Okay. This one, I don't have much to say about it because I have not hand laid track. I do know that some people swear by hand laid track that it works better. What do you guys think? Mike, you go first on this one.
I've done both, and originally when I first started working on my layout, Code 83 wasn't commercially available, so you had to buy some turnouts that were kind of pre-made and then hand lay the ties. The great thing about hand laid ties that I'll say, and this is, maybe everybody wouldn't agree with me but you can make fine-tuning adjustments with them with the spikes and things, and just like you would on the real railroad, and tighten them up or loosen a frog, and you really learn about how they work. And like that, the fast tracks turnouts where you can, have how many people have put a turnout in their layout that has the Atlas ends or the Walthers ends, and then that's just in the wrong spot for, it's a derailment waiting to happen, where if you hand lay the track, you can make a nice gradual curve in it. The prefab track, of course, goes down fast. It goes down fast, and you can really do some things quick, and it looks amazingly good. And a lot of people commented, I weather on my track also. So, and then lately I've even gone as crazy as putting on the joint bars in certain areas, and created a whole nother set of issues for myself. But that's my opinion. But hand laid, if you have the time and You can do some really nice things, but it's almost like I say again, and I'll say it again. It's a hobby within a hobby, but there's some beautiful stuff out there, and you could technically save yourself some money if you're really a quality person. But there are some neat things you can do.
What do you think,
Pass
Murf?
it on.
I do a little bit of both. I've got, I think, every fast track fixture for
Wow.
6 through 12 or something like that. Um, because a lot of times I have to build a custom turnout for a particular area in my layout, and I don't even fully use the fixture. I leave like the ends of it done loose so I can actually continue a curve or something like that to get out of it. Um, it's become really handy. It is really nice in the points of my layout where it's like, oh, I can go store bought here. Boy, that part of the layout goes down real fast. But yeah, there are times the fast tracks ones will work a lot better in the situation where I need them. Now I've seen people that just swear by totally hand laying track. I think in some ways it's almost like just kind of like, I don't know, I get the impression like it's a religious experience for them. Talk about holy wars. and and they will do it through dedication and hairy hair shirtism. And it's like all power to you, and those people are really good at it. I think it's Rick Fortin's layout. He can run trains back to staging fully backwards from what I've heard. As long as the turnouts are lined up, everything's good. That's pretty admirable. So
Excellent.
anyway, yeah.
And along the same line, yeah, speaking of Rick Fortner, his mainline switches are all number 20 or 22 frogs. So they're huge. And they work beautifully, and they're smooth. You can run at track speed and back and reverse. I'm not that dedicated, I'll be honest about it. I'm got some fast track fixtures. I've got to get the switches built, just so I can do it. That's more a matter of trying to learn a skill that I didn't have yet. And that's not to say, nah, I've done it and you haven't. It's
right.
Nah. I hadn't done it, but I've done it now. So now I know I can do it. And that's
Right.
The challenge is against myself, not against somebody else. And that's the important part, is that I push myself to be a little bit better the next time. And that's the key to it. I can lay down flex track. I first time I was involved, I went through the entire main line, which was code 100 Lambert track, and I went through and leveled everything and tapped everything down just right, and it ran flawlessly because I took the time to make sure the track was done right. But that was flex track still. That was not hand laid. So, how you want to do it is up to you. I personally prefer Brio.
I will say one other thing before I advance the slide, which is I think it also depends on, or could depend on, what your financial situation is. And Jack Burgess made this point when he was building his or starting his main layout, the one that became the Yosemite Valley layout that he has now. He said that he didn't have a lot of money to devote to the hobby. And if he had bought FlexTrack, it would have been more expensive and he would have been out of things to do that night because of how quickly it goes down. So he hand laid his entire layout because it extended the enjoyment of the hobby in a way that he could afford, which I think is an interesting sort of a contrast.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's see what the next one is. Oh, steam versus diesel. Oh boy. Well, and that's fine, Mike. So
Okay.
steam versus diesel. What do you guys think about this? I'm going to let you go first on this one, Pat.
Okay, I'm modeling the Southern Pacific in East Oakland in 1959, 1960. It's diesel. That's what was there. That's my choice. That being said, my 0 and 30 stuff, I've got both steam and diesel. I've kit bashed or built up some very intricate kits for the diesels. I'm working on some stuff in 120.3 or 45 millimeter gauge, which is garden railways that are battery powered. Again, those are diesels because they're easier to build. Not be that honest with you. I have, I think, an HO scale. I've got 3 steam locomotives, maybe 4. Of everything else, I've purged because they wouldn't fit in my scheme. But that's just my preference for what's going to fit for my railroad. If you're modeling the Southern Pacific in 1953, you're going to have lots of steam. If you're modeling the Southern Pacific in 1965, you're going to have lots of diesel. That's just the nature of the beast. I think that's the thing you have to look at when you're building a model railroad. Look at what you're trying to build and then fit things accordingly. That's all I can say. You got it, Murph.
Yeah, really, I no holy war for me here. It's the only thing I would say is make sure you build your layout to be able to handle steam if you're going to run it.
Yeah, especially if you're running big steam, right?
Well, yeah, you got to be able to turn that stuff around.
Yeah. Now I'm going to say something about this. Sorry, Murph, was that everything you were going to say?
Nope, done.
Okay. I want to say something about this because there's something happening where I live that has something to do kind of like this, which is Caltrain, our local commute service, just went to all electric. Now I'm going to talk about this in prototype size stuff, not in terms of modeling, because in terms of modeling, it just depends on the era you're trying to model mostly, I think. So one of the very interesting things I've found is that anytime anything new comes up, you have a whole bunch of people who will fight it tooth and nail, and they hate it and they talk crap about it and it sucks and it's going to break down and it's going to be terrible and everything. I'm sure everyone must have heard something similar, and that's what's happening, or what has happened here. There's a lot of sort of stick in the mud, regressive thinking people who can't understand how much better and more efficient the new electric Caltrain EMU sets are compared to the old ones that they were running. I've ridden both, and I got to tell you that the new ones are like floating, and they're so fast on the acceleration and so quick on the deceleration that they've been able to almost double their headways and run a lot more convenient service for the people who ride it. So I look at it and I'm like, what's not to like about that? It's as a practical matter. I mean, sure, you like the F40s, but this is the wave of the future. And it's kind of cool to be, in the 20th century, I'm going to say, when it comes to our rail infrastructure up here for our commutes. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So it's kind of a steam versus diesel versus electric for me.
I want them all to run P8 Pacifics.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We want the 2472.
Yeah. The people came out and I saw the same thing you mentioned, is that everybody did, these things are horrible. The track looks nasty with these overhead wires. It's like, folks, we're not going to go back to train masters. We're not going to go back to Jeep 9s. We're not going to go back to steam engines. Deal with it.
Yeah, if you want to see steam engines, there are plenty of heritage railways around the country. Or if you're in other countries, there's even more, because they take their rail heritage a little more seriously than we do here. But anyway, so I know that wasn't on the list, but it came to me as you guys were talking. This is a holy war, guys. This one. I've seen people almost come to blows on this one, and we can there's another one that's going to come up later. That's graffiti versus no graffiti. We can kind of roll these two together so that we can get through this. I'm just going to let Mike, you're a prototype railroader. What do you think about this stuff? I know. I know real stuff gets weathered. That's just a fact of life. But I'm going to ask you what you think about the graffiti.
Well, I personally, some of it, there's some really nice stuff. I've sent you pictures that I've taken, that was some really nice stuff. But, I can't even, I just see people's pictures and I go, oh God, it's just, even that engine in the background of that tape, it's just covered with graffiti, and it's vandalism, a lot of it. I mean, I don't care what people think about that comment, but, just painting over paint over paint over paint, and everybody's got their stupid name on it or whatever they're trying to achieve. I know people have actually now want to model it, and they do a great job of it. It's kind of neat in that respect. But I just actually purchased some graffiti decal. No, I wouldn't call it graffiti, but the old time graffiti of like the Herbie was here and the chalk marks on the cars, that kind of stuff. And I'm a big weather though. I don't like anything on my layout that's not weathered. But I also can see that I think a lot of people are weathering too much, and they weather cars like they're on their last leg. So you got to be careful with that. But I do like weathering, and like I think Murph mentioned about the SP, with their oil coming down off the where the fuel level was, or oil that dripped out. That kind of stuff looks super neat. And there's nothing going back to steam engines. It seems like most people have steam engines do not want to weather them for like resale value or whatever. But steam engines that are weathered can look super good. And I'm not a big steam fan. I never saw steam in action. The first steam engine I ever saw was probably the Disneyland one, and then the 4449. But when you see steam engines like the Union Pacific had, the big boys with the white that came down from the water, that was the acidic quality of it or whatever makes it that way. That can look so neat. And I've see even videos from the 70s that the cars would get super dirty. And so I think it's weird, but I love weathering on my own equipment on my layout. And I'll take a scale trains engine right out of the box, and some people are like, "Oh no, you can't resell it now," but I don't care. It's mine. It's what I want to do, and I think it looks great. And I get a lot of nice comments. I mean, John's been in my house. I think that I have all these box cars. Every single one of them is weathered. The wheels on them. I was watching stuff roll by with the trucks where mud splatters up. There's some great guys on Instagram. There's a guy named Mike Correa. I think he's from Mexico, and he does some stuff you cannot tell if it's real or not. It's just that his weathering is so good. And I think that's, another hobby. If you're planning on reselling your stuff or putting it back in the box and, putting it away now, that's fine. Do your thing. But when I see nicely weathered stuff, I had a conversation at a hobby shop in Rhode Island I was at yesterday with a guy about weathering, and I was saying, well, that's really nice, and he sort of agreed with me. I weather my automobiles. On the automobiles get weathered, mud, the tires on the trucks. I love that kind of stuff. It's the real world, and structures too. I can barely watch a video that structures aren't weathered or equipment's not weathered, to be honest. And that's all I have to say.
But that was the one that you said the most. I didn't know this was going to be such a hot button for you, Mike.
Yeah, and but that's I'm just going to leave. No.
Right?
Yeah.
I'll say something about this real quickly, which is I like what you said about overweathering. I think people tend to overweather, and I see posts on social media where it's something that it looks like it's been on a spur on a dead track that's been out of service for 50 years. And people are like, "Oh, that's wonderful." It's like, well, it is if it's a support piece, on a siding that's not connected to the main line. But if you put that in a working train, it just won't look right, And I've noticed that let me just put it this way. I've seen a lot of steam engines weathered to that degree. And it's like, my understanding is that when railroads were still running steam, and this is a generalization, and I realize that, but when railroads were still running steam, they took care of them. And a great example is a video I did with Jack Burgess, where he had interviewed someone who actually worked on the YV, and his very first job on the YV was wiping down the engines with something called pearl oil, which is some kind of an oil-based thing that made them look really nice. He had to wipe down the engines almost every day to keep them looking good. So what I'm getting at is, back in the day, they didn't let stuff get all rusty and screwed up. They maintained it and made it look good because the railroad companies knew that train was their billboard. That was their advertising. They wanted to show people, look, we run a very good business. It's like your storefront. So that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm sorry. I'm going to say one more thing. The other thing I want to say about it is that doesn't mean to me to just take it out of the box and run it as it came out of the box. But it does mean to me that you have to know what you're modeling if you want to be realistic and do something that is more like what would have been real and not something that's overdone. I don't know if that makes sense. In other words, weather it, but don't over-weather it for me.
Yeah, I think it's gone to that point where some people are starting to over-weather. You might see one car that's weathered like that in a train, but not every car. It's not just like, going to the scrapyard.
Sure.
And by the same token, you're going to see that one car that you look at the build date that was 6 months before your time frame. That car's going to look clean and new. So that's, one car is not a bad thing. It just, I do my weathering to a photograph. I'll go through and look at photographs, color photographs, and I can get them and see, okay, this was this way, this was that way. If you look at a picture of SP Taylor Yard in the 1970s, and you'll see that the Tuscan cars are 5 different shades of boxcar red. It's some were weathered more than others, and no two cars look identical, and that's just the way the beast was.
Yeah, another art within an art within a hobby.
God,
it really
yeah.
is.
And
something I'm going to say, chiming in. Oh, he's shushing the cat, I think.
Yeah, I got to give him some food.
Something I want to say about the graffiti, because I said we'd roll these into two, into the same slide here, because graffiti is coming up later and we're running short on time, is 2 things. First off, I think that a lot of the people who do graffiti are very, very talented artists. With that being said, the caveat for me is in order to put that amazing art, in some cases, onto a rail car, crimes have to be committed, meaning they have to trespass, because there's nowhere where someone is, well, can't say there's nowhere, never say never, but there's hardly anywhere in the world where the railroads are saying, here, graffiti artists, come to our yard and put yourself in danger of moving trains so that you can paint your message on the side of our car. They don't do that. But by the same token, I will say that I think having graffiti like on modern day cars does make trains look a little bit more interesting, especially if you're talking about a unit train that's just, 200 hoppers or something. If they're all exactly the same, it's kind of boring in a way. And I have talked to other railroaders, and actually, Mike, you might say something about this, that if you're working on the railroad, you get to see some of these things and you never know it's like fishing. You never know what you're going to get. You might get one of these reefers that has a really weird or funny message on it, or something that makes you laugh. And my understanding is that railroads generally think it's fresh paint. So as long as you're not covering up the reporting marks, the car is still usable, and they don't seem to really care about that.
Yeah, I mean they some guys will literally tape over the reporting marks so that they don't get marked up and stuff. But a lot of times, sometimes the car numbers are painted over, and as a lot of people know, they're like little stickers, so you can actually even see the stickers through the paint. Or you're looking at the high numbers are on the ends of the cars that nobody can ever get to. Then you can actually see the number on it, but that gets a little annoying here and there. But I think that the graffiti goes in line with weathering. That the people now are weathering and graffitiing at the same time, and so it's that part of it's gone together with the hobby. And if I was modeling modern day, I definitely would be doing putting the graffiti on.
I have a question about prototype railroading, Mike. if you came across a car that someone who didn't, I'm going to say it's someone who didn't know what they were doing when they painted the graffiti because they painted over the reporting marks. Does that car get bad ordered so that they can correct it?
Oh no, we could care less. We're just trying to get the heck out of there, and I mean, it's just that the numbers are usually visible in some way or another, and of course you have a list of the cars that are already there, so you could probably figure that might be there. Now, I never seen a car that was so much graffiti on it that I couldn't see one of the numbers on it. Every so often you catch maybe like one letter of it, but it's just I'm not going to take the time. I mean, if they don't care, I don't care. That's the way I look at it. I'm not going to waste another minute of my life calling somebody who doesn't care, you know. And if they're letting it go on, as far as I'm concerned, so it's their problem as a company. And if if they don't want to police it, do whatever. Their railroad yards are often isolated, so you're going to have that going on. But at the same time, same token, I mean, I know people have gotten run over, and that to me is just like that's their problem. I'm not looking out for you. I used to a long time ago, but whatever happens, happens. Believe me, if you're out there graffitiing cars in the middle of the night, like John said, and you're crossing tracks, some cars might be rolling down there, and you're dead. Well, I hope it was worth it.
So for me, the major thing on weathered, I hate seeing nickel silver wheel faces behind trucks.
Yes.
That drives me crazy. Shiny Delrin side trucks drive me crazy. Other than that, a light weathering is kind of nice. As you say, a lot of people really overdo it. Trying to do the roof appropriately is, I think, the biggest thing, since we're looking a lot of the times at that. I haven't tried doing any decal or any graffiti lately. I suppose I should. I do mostly model modern times. But I would think the thing is, you start with a kind of a clean car, apply the graffiti, and then you actually weather on top, I would guess. But and the only actual graffitied thing that I really, really want to do someday is the rail beast the tiger striped, was that a UP engine?
Mm-hmm.
That got done just because it's such a disaster. You see no reporting marks at all on this thing. It's pretty astounding. I don't know how many cans of paint they had to go through that.
They covered the windows too, which is
that's
you can
true.
tell they didn't care if it stayed that way or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was quite enterprising. At any rate, that's kind of that for me.
Yeah, you know what? That is an amazing factor in, some of these guys with their paint, and it's just like I would occasionally find some spray paint, and then I would spray paint, over some graffiti or whatever, just for the heck of it, or some lack of something to do, and you go, wow, to paint this much, you're really having to spend a lot of money in paint. It's just not that easy, and it doesn't cover that easily. And I'm often going, oh, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But whatever,
yeah,
it's crazy.
I got the UP 1943 Armed Services engine. I was going through and I did the wheels, and then I got out my airbrush. I'm like, okay, time to weather it. And I got out pictures and I went, well, time to clean up the airbrush.
Yeah, I've even seen newer locomotives go by with a TSG sticker on them. So
yeah, I don't know who would vandalize a piece of railroad.
I just don't know. It's a small little sticker, TSG Media, and I go, wow, I got to find those guys. They're interesting.
Yeah, if we see them, we'll let you know.
Yeah. I have a very strong suspicion who might deface a piece of railroad property with something like that. But probably won't be happening a lot in the future though, because I don't have any more of those stickers.
Very good.
Anyway, should I go to the next one?
Yes.
Okay.
I would skip all the way and skip that one.
We did
that
this.
one. We
Skip that one.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, there you go.
Uh-oh.
That's a real holy war.
This is a holy war, and I didn't even count all of them. This is just the main ones. I'm not touching it.
I'm a soundtracks man.
Yeah. What about you, Mike?
Yeah.
Are you a soundtracks guy?
I
I have a lot of scale trains uses ESU, right?
They sure do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they do.
it's pretty good. I've had more, to be honest, I've had a little trouble with the soundtracks, the few I do have. So the ESU, I'll just say the ESU has got the top notch for right now, as far as I'm concerned. But I'm not putting them in myself, I can tell you that much.
Right.
You know,
I am putting them in myself. Actually, the worst surgery I did was ripping out a BLI decoder, which is their own thing, and putting in a soundtracks decoder, because the BLI one kept losing its mind.
My understanding is that MTH's DCS thing was also kind of a bizarre protocol that didn't work with a lot of layouts.
Yeah, and you can argue with those folks, and they're crazy.
My favorite stories are the ones of people who pay a premium for a BLI, and they know ahead of time that they're not going to use whatever Paragon or whatever, because it doesn't play nice with their layout. I don't really know why that happens, but it must be frustrating because Broadway comes out with a lot of really beautiful models.
I love their models.
Yeah.
I absolutely love their models.
And they're the only ones who I'm sorry, Murph.
But they've changed now. You can actually get something with basically it's decoder ready.
Yeah, they call it a stealth thing.
Yeah, and that's pretty cool. I'm happy with that because like I say, I really like their models a lot.
Yeah,
and they're nice. They got a nice heft to them too.
Oh yeah, they're beautiful models.
Yeah. So, okay, I think you all know where I stand on the Holy War.
It's kind of interesting. I mean, working on Rick Fortin's railroad, where he has no sound equipped locomotives, and I've never missed the sound. That being said, I enjoy having it. It's just, it's a fun feature. I remember when they first came out with the soundtrack decoders. My first ever decoder install was a soundtrack decoder in a SD7. Now let's start at the deep end of the pool, I guess. But I just sound can go either way. It's the same sort of thing. Do you even need sound? There's so many people that run sound at full volume that it's almost more of a nuisance than a attribute.
All right. Guess what? I think we have only one slide left.
Cool.
Oh, yeah. This one's. I don't know. I mean, what do you? Does it matter? I mean, to me.
Can I say something about this first?
Yeah, you go first.
I had a good friend of mine, a model railroad down here, and he goes, "You don't have any passenger trains?" And I like, "No, I don't." And because he was like, because he loves running passenger trains, and I go, I model 1979, and a lot of routes do not have passenger trains, so I don't have any. And passenger trains are beautiful. I have a very fond memory of being down in Orange County Raceway watching the drag races, and in the background was a San Diego going by at night with all the lights on. But boy, was that ever neat seeing that. And after that, I went out and bought a new 1N scale passenger car, some Atlas passenger car that had lights in it, because it was so neat to see the lights in it. And that part I appreciate though. And as far as passenger trains, I don't like riding them. I worked on passenger trains early on before Amtrak used the host railroads crews to run them before they got their own people. And to me, it's like being in the airline industry or something. You got to deal with most freight does not complain, but you get these people complaining about things about the bed's too hard. It smells in here, and that's another issue about diesel steam. I've heard that steam engines with the smell of the gases that were going off would almost asphyxiate people. And I used to hate being on the Amtrak train as a brakeman. I never worked as a conductor, but every time somebody opened a vestibule, you smell that diesel smell, and you go, "Oh God." Just stop it. And that's electric trains too. I'm sure that might be a nice thing for your Caltrain thing with the electric engines now, that you will not have that smell. When people continually got to go through all the cars all the time and suck in that diesel smoke, especially in tunnels or overpasses or anything.
Well,
That's all I have to say.
Yeah, they're also tend to be closed. I mean, the doors open obviously at the stations to let people on and off the train, but there's no open vestibules or any leaks like that on the trains themselves, and they don't take them apart. They're EMUs, right? So they come from the factory as a set, and I don't even think that they're able to take them apart here in case one of them goes bad. So they have to have enough to make it work. So, but that's interesting.
Right.
I didn't know, Mike, that you had worked on passenger trains too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'll have to ask you about that somewhere.
Another cat.
Oh
That
boy,
is
that
not
one's
my
even
cat.
louder.
That's
Wow.
not my cat.
Oh, it looks like Pat went on the phone. Okay.
Oh,
That means it's your
okay.
turn, Murf.
Okay, freight versus passenger. I like it. I've got a few. I basically made a Coast Starlight so I can run it at the club. I enjoy it. Like Mike, I still remember fondly when I was younger, passenger trains were just the thing. When you were a kid growing up, those were the things that were, indicative of like real railroads. I love the streamlined passenger units, the E units, the F units, that kind of stuff. Those were pretty magic. So, yeah, I
Beautiful.
love
They
them.
were beautiful. Some of them.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
like works of art. That was back in the day.
They really
that
were.
was,
And
One of the
I hope
cool
it gets
things,
back there.
yeah, one of the cool things about that time, I just spent several hours on Sunday, this past weekend. We were actually documenting or cataloging a bunch of what do you call it? China, a bunch of China on the SBHRS's collection, because they have little displays everywhere in the depot there. And it was funny because I actually ended up calling or text messaging Pat, because Pat happens to be a pretty up on railroad China. And what it did for me looking at this stuff is it made me think how different it must have been when the class ones basically were running these very specialized passenger trains, and it was like a first class affair. I mean, the China was really good. They had custom, it looks like hand painted stuff. If it wasn't hand painted, it was printed in a way that looks hand painted. And
A lot of it was appliques.
What's that?
A lot of it was appliques.
Okay.
Put on over the first glaze and under the second glaze.
My point though is that it was a very classy, fancy thing that the railroads were doing, and you could tell that they took a lot of pride in it. So to me, that's just really interesting, and it's a departure, right, from what we have now. I know that for a long time, Amtrak had a similar approach where they had good food and it was a good experience, but it seems like it's gone. I don't know. I never got to ride them in, between 79 to like 95 or whatever. I did ride at the California Zephyr from here to Salt Lake City a few years ago. I think it was 2018. And the experience of riding the train probably is the same, because you don't ride a train to get to where you're going. You ride the train to ride the train. But to be honest, I ate dinner in their dining car, and I was not very impressed with the food. I mean, just being blunt about it.
I'll go back to 1963 when I rode the city of San Francisco back to Chicago, and silver finger bowls and things like that. I'd never, 10 years old, I'd never seen a finger bowl. I know what the heck a finger bowl was. But it was a classy operation. You fool,
Yeah.
you've eaten the last finger. But no, it was just, that sort of thing. And And then in the late 60s, we'd take Easter vacation and go down to San Diego. I go down to Disneyland. We'd ride the San Joaquin down the valley because my father's employee pass would work on the San Joaquin. It would not work on the daylight because that was a first class train. And again, we ate the first time we went down. We ate in the dining car. The second and third times we went down, we ate in the automat car. Totally different world. But
So,
yeah, go
to
ahead.
kind of bring this back a little bit more to model railroading and that
Mhm.
the applicability, if you really want to change up in your operations, put in a passenger train at high priority, and
Yep.
Yeah.
make people take the sidings and get to the side and get the heck out of the way, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You can kind of do that with a modern day unit train or something like that that's just going through. But there's nothing like actually having a high priority passenger train coming through to kind of get your dispatcher on the stick.
Yeah, and then also that if maybe an operator who's trying to learn the layout can run the passenger train and learn the layout and not have to do the little intricacies of switching. And passenger trains were always high seniority jobs because they were bid-in jobs, and the people with the low seniority in the division were working the passenger trains because they could get over the road quick. You were paid by the mile, and it was a clean job. You knew plus you were on a schedule, so
That's
you
the
got to
big
look at
one
it
right
that way
there,
too.
right? Yeah, on a
Yeah.
schedule, not on call. That's a big deal, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And what the one that went up the coast, you went on duty at 9:30 in the morning. You got to San Luis Obispo at 2 o'clock. You could have a nice dinner, go to the hotel, get some nice sleep. The next day at 12 o'clock, go home.
Yeah, I was gonna say I remember Bill Burkett, but he'd run his last few years as an Amtrak engineer. He'd run on the California Zephyr, and he'd run from Oakland up to Sparks, or up to Reno actually. And they'd bus over to the Nugget and Sparks, and yeah, they went back the next day because we happened to run into them at Sparks. We happened to run into this crew as they're coming in. It was just purely coincidence, but I'm choosing the model 1960 in East Oakland. There were only 2 passenger trains each way every day, and I'm modeling after the northbound or westbound trains went through and before the eastbound trains went through. So I didn't have to deal with the Oakland Lark or the Oakland Daylight because I missed them both, falling between them for my operating schedule. That's my schedule, and that's I've just sort of moved passenger trains off of the railroad, and that's the advantage of prototype operations. I don't want the passenger trains, I can get rid of them. Whereas Mark Calvert up in Vancouver, BC, on his railroad that I operated in 2004, he had passenger operations. You'd go from this town to that town, switch out the baggage car or the express car, and pick up another express car and go on to the next 2 or 3 stations. So he made passenger operations as a switching operation, which it really was. So if you want to use them, there's ways to use them and to add interest to the railroad.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
some of these guys have the coach yards. I mean, that's a whole nother
Oh God, yes.
thing, and you got to really admire the people that do that. It's just a neat thing to have. I mean, there's some layouts that it's fascinating, in its own light.
I think a lot
Turning
of people,
the trains.
yeah, I think a lot of people kind of shy away from passenger on model railroads. I think they shy away from passenger service or simulating passenger service because the equipment is also very expensive. So, I mean, you could build a California Zephyr, the old Western Pacific one, and sometimes you have to get brass cars because they don't even make the one that you need in plastic. So it can get to be a very expensive proposition unless you go for what's good enough. Right. Right. Going back to the other slide that we had, we've come to the end of the slides, guys, but
Thank goodness.
I did save some of the comments that came up earlier. And I don't know, do you guys have time? We can do kind of a quick thing on these if you want to.
I would sort of like to go because I have been home for 7 days, so
Okay.
I would sort of like to say good
Okay.
night.
In that case, there was one other thing. I think, Murph, you were going to say something about the conversation that was going on the side there.
Yeah, there's a conversation that's going on in our chat here about younger model railroaders. And I would just like to kind of emphasize that part of younger model railroaders being in the hobby is on us. We have
Right.
several younger model railroaders in our club at SVL. They operate. Matter of fact, they're some of our best operators. They pay attention. They're really good. They act responsible all the time. I remember when I was young getting into model railroading, I'd go into the hobby shop and all the older model railroaders would be talking in a little scrum over to the side and they would act like I was a pariah. Try not to be those guys. This is a big hobby. There are kids that actually like getting into this stuff. If you look nowadays, kids are getting into robotics and stuff like that. They aren't just doing computer stuff. They're doing things with their hands. They're making models. They actually will do a lot of stuff. We have one guy at our club. He won the Walters modeling thing in one category, and he's going to be actually working on some of my area, kind of sprucing it up a bit. So these kids are doing okay. They don't do Model Railroader magazine. So a poll by Model Railroader magazine, that doesn't matter. There's many online resources these kids can go to now, and
Right.
they don't have to pay for it. It's really good. There are a lot of great modelers out there that'll share their stuff, and they take advantage of it, and they learn. And it's not all just electronic or computerized trains. And some of them do that too, but a lot of them come to here for the actual learning of how things work. So let's not be hard on the younger generation. Let's not be gloom and doom on the death of the hobby, because these kids are not that.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
No,
that is my
that's
holy
good
war.
process. That's good
Boy,
prophesizing.
I feel like
Bill
feel like I
Decker up
should-
here. Go ahead.
I feel like I should have just put you on the center stage for that, Murph.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It's too late now.
Now, Bill
Yeah,
Decker up
well.
here has a couple of kids that are in their early teens, I'm going to say 13, 14, who normally run his main East End yard at Eugene. And this is their yard. And everybody on the crew, including a lot of us who are gray haired or no haired, accept that these kids are sharp. And thank you, Murph. Yes, I was waiting for that. No, these kids are sharp, and they're really good. I mean, one of them will get out on the road periodically. Oh, yes. But I think that that's an important point. And again, to what I mentioned earlier when I was talking with you about, you mentioned that my wife and I invited you to get involved in things when you first got involved with the region, is that it's on us to step up and be educators and to open up the doors and invite the people in, and to realize that we don't know all the answers. We don't know how to do all the things. To encourage them to find where these things are, to give them resources so that they can find their own way some, to involve them in op sessions and things like that. And it's only going to help the hobby. It's not going to hurt us in any way, shape, or form. So I think that we just need to encourage them to be involved. At the RPM meet a week ago, there were a lot of kids. Again, in their teens. God, I remember my teens vaguely.
I was impervious then. I was indestructible.
Yeah.
Not so much.
Well, I want to sort of wrap things up in a way here. First off, thanks to you guys for taking the time to do this today. Always enjoy talking to all of you, one-on-one or in a group, whatever. It's all good.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
This is great. Thank you.
I do. Well, thank you. I do want to mention, well, thank you too. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
No, we can do this all night. No, but I was going to say, it's interesting how you're kind of, I don't know, I wasn't planned to do this, but I like what you're saying, Pat, about don't be the grumpy guy. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because I'm working on the program for next month. If you've been watching this channel, you know, last year I had something with a bunch of podcasters and Tony Cook, who I don't think he does a podcast per se, but he's the editor for the Model Railroad Resource magazine that White River puts out. And he was kind of the moderator for a panel discussion of people who are podcasters, including me. And I'm trying to get those same guys together next month to do a show. And I think one of the topics we're going to cover is to not be the grumpy guy. So that'll be
Absolutely.
interesting, right? That'll be interesting to hear their comments about that. Something else I want to mention is that people in the chat here today, the live chat on the side of the screen, we're also talking about something that's been on my mind for a while. And that is the advent of model railroading or railroading virtually on these PC games like Train Simulator. And I don't really know, maybe I do know someone who does that and I just don't know that they do it, but I would really like to get some people on a program to talk about that, people who do it and are very involved in that community. So if anybody out there is interested in being a guest on a show like that, please contact me at podcast@tsgmultimedia.com so that I can pick your brain about topics or whatever. And maybe it's, like I said, maybe it's somebody I know, but I just don't know that they do it. That would be kind of cool. One other thing I do want to mention just really briefly, and this is kind of a housekeeping thing, which is this Saturday, the next episode, I'm going to call it the next episode in my garden scale climax build happens. It's going to come out at 9 a.m. on Saturday, and we're going to letter the side of the engine on that video and then do a little test run. So just for FYI. So anyway, guys, we went a little bit past our time. I know you want to take off, Mike, which I understand since you've been gone for all that time.
Yeah, I want to go over to Murph's room and help him clean up his room. He's right next to me.
Yeah,
We've been commenting. It's so funny. It looks like I'm right in the same room with you, Murph.
Yeah.
I got this.
Did you see that he tried to hand you a drink?
Blends there.
Yeah, did you see, Murph? I'm here. Have a Dr. Pepper, Murph. Oh yeah. Hey, I want that. I want that beer.
Yeah, what we really need to do is have, what is it, 9, I think, 3x3, and we can really do a Brady.
Here's the story of a man named John.
God.
Hold on, I'm looking at you, Mike.
Oh,
I'm looking at you. All right, guys.
First he met Cindy.
Right.
Then he met Murphy.
But then you never know who you might run into. All right, guys, I'm going to hit end on this, and the music is hopefully going to play automatically. And then through magic, we'll still be here. So if you want to hang out for a second, we'll say goodbye after the music plays. All right.
Okay.
Thanks for everybody watching that was at home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And
thanks
very much.
Yep. Also, thanks to the moderators for trying to keep everybody in the chat on track. You see what I did there? We'll talk to you all later.
Oh boy.